So, over the course of the last semester, we've covered several topics that apply to me, not only my major, but also to everything that I utilize and interact with in my daily life. And so I thought for my exam 3, I would cover 2 topics that I thought were really interesting out of the several we could pick from. And those 2 topics are going to be the lethal gift of livestock and the just the overall zoonotic disease spread and the spread of diseases across humanity. So the reason I decided to pick these 2 is because I just thought that the lethal gift of livestock was something that applied heavily to my major especially, and just something that I work with pretty heavily. I work with a lot of livestock and ranching animals a lot, so kind of acknowledging and understanding that zoonotic diseases are a huge part of animal production, and getting to talk about it in class was something that I was able to relate to a lot. And I thought, a topic that came to mind when we began the discussion of zoonotic diseases was the issue of bushmeat in Africa and Asia. And if you aren't familiar with the topic, bushmeat is a term that refers to the consumption of exotic animals. Usually you see it in rural communities, so a lot of it has to do with just poor distribution of quality, healthy food. And some examples of animals that you might see being used for bushmeat are anything from bats to things like various wild cat species, monkeys, other primates, things like that. And the consumption of bushmeat is actually what led to the outbreak of Ebola. And so I thought that the whole bushmeat epidemic was something that applied heavily to the topic that we're discussing. And it just came to mind because that's always been something I was really fascinated by, was the consumption of all these strange exotic animals. And to go more into other diseases that these animals carry, not only can you get Ebola from consuming bushmeat, but you can also contract HIV and SARS. So that was just something that I thought applied pretty heavily, not only to this unit, but also to our last unit, because we talked about how improper sourcing of food and improper distribution of food can really heavily affect communities just based on what that community might be eating. And just because humans have always been a part of human life, it seems evident to me that you'd think that humanity would understand how to better control diseases, and you'd think we'd have a better grasp on the fact that pretty much every epidemic in history has been technically a zoonotic disease epidemic, with the mass spread of the COVID-19 recently. The bubonic plague was a zoonotic disease spread by rats and having negative interactions with rats. So just human-animal interactions generally result in mass disease outbreaks. And I think it definitely applies really heavily to today, because with COVID and how it's changed everything, while the root cause of COVID isn't quite clear yet, a lot of evidence does suggest that COVID is a zoonotic disease, and it is something that, well, of course it is a zoonotic disease, as it's been proven that it can be contracted back and forth between species, but it was something I found especially interesting because there's evidence that backs COVID being caused by bushmeat consumption. So overall, I just thought the discussion of zoonotic diseases and disease pandemics across the world was something that I found really interesting. So it was definitely a unit that I was able to take a lot from, and it was something that I enjoyed reading about in the book. So that is my exam 3.